Hi everyone, good to see you all. Thank you all for joining. We've got 250, nearly 250 people, so we'll try and get those numbers up. It's always good to see people willing to join us.
Everyone.
Evening for me, but please share in the chat if it's the morning. 200. We had some funky jazz going on in the background there. Hopefully to get you all in the mood. But please keep sharing where you're from. It's always fun to see how many countries we can get in our sessions. I think the record, if I'm not mistaken, is around 12. So if we can get more than 12 today, I'll consider today a win already. Hello from the Isle of Man. That might be the first Isle of Man attendee I've seen. Hello, Stephen. We've got North Carolina. Hello, Barbara. We have Sweden. Very nice. Oregon, USA. USA is always repping, always representing. Couple more minutes and then we'll get started, but I think we may have already beaten our record of 12 countries, to be honest. It looks very active. Ecuador, Belgium, Munich. I went to Munich for the first time last year and it was very memorable. Darren and I had quite a time in Munich. So yeah, very, very fond of Munich. The smallest nation to go to the World Cup, Curacao. Very well done. I think next summer is going to be very interesting, isn't it? Yeah, always love a bit of football chat as well. Cool. One more minute and then we'll get started. Hello, hello, hello from Salzburg. Very nice. Tel Aviv, you've got Canada, Costa Rica, India. Wow, this is, yeah, I don't think it's close. This is by far our best session yet. So I think we're good for numbers for now, so I'm going to get started. Hello, everyone. It's always good to see you, as always. Thank you for joining us today. I will be going through our session today, which is the top AI and automation trends for 2026. My name is Michael Nketsia. I'm the product marketing manager at Make, and I'll be your host today. I'm joined by Darren, our VP of product advocacy and market strategy. And Darren spends a lot of time thinking about where AI and automation are actually heading and not just what the hype says they are. So Darren, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick intro.
Yes, thank you, Michael. It's great to get a chance to spend some time with a few thousand individuals across the world that are interested in these types of topics. So good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. It's great to spend some time with you. I've been at Make for about 4 years, and I'm incredibly passionate about sort of the big picture strategy of where things are going, but also the nitty-gritty details. So looking forward to sharing a few insights with you today. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Darren. Yeah, as I say, thank you all very much. Just a few housekeeping items. You'll see there's a chat button, which you're all familiar with now, which is great. There is also a Q&A button at the top right-hand corner. Please feel free as we go through the session to leave any questions or any topics that come to mind that you'd like Darren's expertise on. We'd be more than happy to try and get to it at the end of the session. So on to our agenda for today. So here's what we'll cover in the next 45 minutes. So we'll do a quick intro to Make, and then we'll delve into a topic I'm sure you're all familiar with at this point, is the AI promise and why expectations ran so high. And then we will go into 4 practical ways to move from promise to practice in 2026. We'll get to the meat of it. And then you can take the next step in your journey, what you can do next starting today. And then we will try and make some time later for a live Q&A to go through some of your questions. Again, please feel free to pop them into the Q&A box, and we'll have them answered at the end of the session. We'll do our best to make this as practical as possible, so there'll be a few demos strewn throughout the session as well. But yes, as I say, any questions you have, please drop them in the Q&A and we will try and get to them. So just a quick intro to Make. So for those of you new to Make, this is the short version. If you're already familiar with Make, please indulge me for a few minutes. So Make basically exists to make business agility possible by unlocking innovation inside organizations. We're trusted by over 350,000 makers globally, which is quite impressive. We are a team of just over 350, which is growing actually. I think that number's increased a little bit. And we have been pioneers in this space since 2016. And now obviously we are venturing more and more into agentic AI, and some of that we'll discuss today. We are happily part of the Celonis family, which has obviously done very well, but don't take our word for it. Our customers obviously rate us very highly and continue to do so, which is always nice. As you see, we have a number of different integrations that allow you to do so much across multiple different work fronts and verticals. But at the heart of it, we try to meet you where you are, be as visually empowering as possible, and we see and hope many people will find value in what we bring as we move forward. Now, on to the meat of it. So let's talk about 2025. If you're anything like me, 2025 was meant to be the year of the AI promise. Everything from, Skynet to, making all of us multi-billionaires overnight. I'm sure there was all sorts of promises made and all sorts of expectations. There was and still is a lot of excitement about what AI could unlock, primarily speed, scale, autonomy, and intelligence baked into everything. And honestly, it was everywhere. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere on social media without seeing an outlandish, sometimes headline of some sort similar to this. LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you might be, you might see some sort of proclamation about how you should be making $1 billion a month using AI agents and putting your feet up and doing next to nothing. Obviously, this kind of attention and excitement created a lot of hope and ambition, and obviously a lot of massive expectations as well. But unfortunately, the reality was not as promising for a lot of people. So in many organizations, the promise wasn't realized, unfortunately. So earlier this year, MIT published research showing that only 5% of AI experiments actually make it past experimentation into real business value. And Gartner then doubled down and then predicted that 40% of AI agent projects will be cancelled in the coming years due to cost, complexity, or lack of ROI. So what this meant is that if you're familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, it's meant that we are, or Gartner have proclaimed that we are at the peak of the hype cycle. And we've seen this pattern before. A new technology enters the public consciousness. There's a lot of excitement about it, about all the potential of what it can do. Unfortunately, at some point, for better or worse, for better and worse, reality hits. Some people see some benefit, others don't. And then the value tends to emerge after a lot of hard work and a lot of perseverance and determination. But as Benedict Evans said in his recent AI Eats the World presentation, not everything works. Welcome to tech. So before we move on, I'd love to hear from all of you in the chat. If you wouldn't mind dropping just where you are. Where do you think your business sits on the curve right now? If you could drop it in the chat. Are you in early experimentation? Are you scaling? You might be struggling, or are you already seeing value? It would be good to see some of the responses from people on the session today. Still seeing some comments about where people are from, which is great. All good. Okay. So anyway, if you're scaling, experimentation, excellent. Early experimentation, value, interesting. Maybe you might be answering some questions later as well. So yeah, early experimentation, excellent. Very, very good to see. Regardless of where you are, ultimately, the goal is the same. We are wanting to chase value and not hype. And I think that is the perfect seg to hand over to you, Darren. Over to you, Darren.
Fantastic. Michael, thanks so much for that setup. I can definitely say we've seen such a wide variety of Make customers all over the world that have effectively taken this technology and brought about a tremendous amount of value. Everywhere from literally farmers in Spain that are able to use a very simple WhatsApp interface in order to do their invoicing, all the way to organizations that are managing your car service dealerships to effectively make sure that customers get fantastic service on a day-to-day basis. At the same time, as much of the world is headed into a time of year where you might take some holiday and take some time off to relax and recharge, reflect on the year, and think about new things to come, we've been thinking deeply about the future. And of course, what are the emerging trends that enable all of us to get that incredible value in AI and automation, and of course, bring it to regular practice. Today, we'll get an opportunity to look at 4 key trends that are shaping AI and automation in 2026, everything from chatbots to workflows, architectures that work. What I believe is context is king or queen, and of course, how do we think about new technologies like MCP and applying them into the real world workspace? And that kicks us off with this concept of from chatbots to workflows. And one of my core beliefs in working in automation for a long period of time, and my core belief in the future of work, which is maybe a little bit of a dream, but I fundamentally believe that work should be happening when you aren't working. And one of the things that we actually saw as a trend over the last couple of years, when people began to realize the power and the incredible capabilities of AI in their organizations, it became almost a quick, off-the-cuff sort of understanding of AI to think of AI as Gemini or ChatGPT, in other words, a chat interface. And even as we entered into 2025 and we started to think about what is the possibility of AI agents in order to accomplish work for you on your behalf without you interacting with it and having to do everything. But this sort of misconception came up, which is AI equals a chatbot. And even many of you that have deployed AI agents in a production-ready scenario, you've created them as Slack chatbots. And what we would propose here as we look into 2026 is, if your agents only act whenever you ask them to do something, you might potentially be doing it wrong and missing out on the broader opportunity to really understand how work can progress in your companies. It used to be in the old model that as humans, we come into work all the time. And of course, we are absolutely supercharged by the ability to notice some problem and of course, prompt AI and interact with AI to get some work done. And of course, in the world of agentic AI, we're able to have it automatically do things. But increasingly, we see in the future that the really important application of agentic automation in our organizations really happens behind the scenes without me having to kick it off and, of course, talk to AI in order to accomplish work. So these are the types of patterns where systems detect work that's ready to be done and initiate workflows and, of course, complete a job either end-to-end or only reaching out to individuals when they are required in order to keep work moving forward. In other words, agents shouldn't be thought of kind of your working assistant, but actually they are orchestrating all of your work and running it fundamentally. Now, this is a key concept that I want you to keep in mind as we look at the next sections. And of course, when we get an opportunity to demonstrate some of the things of how we accomplish this inside of Make, and we'll see some real world examples of what that looks like. But that brings us to our second key trend in 2026 that's going to continue to become really important for organizations to know how to break into that prolonged value for AI and agentic automation. That's fundamentally thinking about an architecture, in other words, a way of thinking about business problems to break them down and effectively have the right tools to solve them at different points in time. We heard a lot of interesting statistics from Michael early on. There's another really fascinating one that we've identified recently. This comes from the Remote Labor Index data organization. And they actually claim that AI agents are actually capable of completing less than 2.5% of real-world tasks that were once done by remote freelance workers. Now, depending on your perspective, this is actually in some ways a sad number. We had hoped, according to that promise, that AI agents would be capable of everything. But if you look at like 4 years ago, none of this work was actually accomplished autonomously by these individual AI agents. So in some ways, it's a little bit of both positive and negative news. OpenAI also confirmed this sort of impact as well on real-world economically valuable tasks. And what's important to recognize here is that AI agents are incredibly powerful, absolutely, but they're just one tool among a set of tools available to organizations to ultimately automate their work. At the end of the day, AI agents are actually just another form of automation. They're automating the generation of text or automating the analysis of text or images, et cetera. It's a hyper realization of automation. And so when we think about what does this mean coming into 2026, we're reminded of understanding that there's an entire spectrum of the type of capabilities that are necessary and possible to deploy in order to solve a core business problem with automation. On the far left side of this automation spectrum, we have what many of us know as workflow automation. In other words, a highly set of deterministic rules that determine when something happens or when a condition's identified, then we're going to execute a particular set of actions. On the far right hand of the spectrum, we have, of course, the incredible world of agentic automation, where AI is actually used to determine what steps should be fired and how those steps should be interacted with and which steps to do next. And of course, right in the middle, we see an incredible amount. Over the last several years, we've seen people actually bring AI into their business workflows on a regular basis to be able to kind of mix and match, yes, a deterministic set of steps, but an identification of leveraging the incredible power of AI to drive the generative capabilities within a core business process. And within this entire spectrum, what we see coming into 2026 for many of the people that are on the call with us today is the absolute importance of understanding that these are a suite of tools that are likely to get applied to different business situations with different context. And even in a single workflow, as we'll see in just a moment when we take a look at a demonstration, even in a single workflow, you'll notice a mix of these tools that are utilized within different steps of an entire business process. Of course, when you think about selecting the right tool, things that are focused on workflow automation are really focused on and very effective with tasks that have clear, fixed rules, highly structured data, and the rules are stable and predictable. That actually still happens a lot in business. And I expect in the several years to come, core workflow automation that's highly deterministic will absolutely still be a reality. If you look at where workflows that bring AI into the business are most effective, it's at places where you're deriving structured data, creating new content entirely or summarizing content, or even extracting content in a certain format. Also, AI is incredibly good at analyzing different types of content, whether it's multimedia or text, for analyzing sentiment or even ensuring brand compliance. And on the far right hand of the spectrum, we identify that agents have an absolutely key place in our automation landscape, where judgment's required or reasoning to be able to select the right task, or in situations where you have hard to maintain rules that change constantly. We'll see an example of those in one of these demos coming up as well. Well, I've said the word demo a few times, so it's absolutely time that we get a chance to take a look at the Make product itself. But first, one caveat, we'll certainly get a chance to get inspired by some real-world use cases and see some of the core capabilities of Make. And while I'd love to spend several hours with all of you today showing every feature of Make, we won't be able to do a comprehensive training or look at every single feature, but instead hopefully leave inspired and have an understanding and a reinforcement of the concepts that we've talked about today. And again, right before the demo, we know that great demos are based in real stories. And so for a moment, we're going to practice a little bit of imagination, and we're going to set our demo stage up so that we can all kind of get on the same page, if you will, for the types of automations that we're about to take a look at. So if you all indulge me for a moment, imagine you're an account manager at a prestigious New York City advertising agency. or maybe it's Milan or Rio de Janeiro if you prefer. But either way, you work with some of the biggest brands in the world, and there's a boatload of pressure if you've ever worked in a company like this. And you have clients that submit requests for new campaigns all the time. They have other marketing needs, and your job is to basically ensure that these projects get quickly managed and effectively. Now, you might have had an instinct right here to say, man, this account manager, they need an AI agent that they can talk to in order to execute work. But I would ask you and suggest that we want to fight that urge and instead think about holistically how work gets done within this New York City advertising agency. And in fact, if you really kind of break down how work gets done, you can see this is a real world example of the types of campaign briefs that they're provided by clients on a regular basis. So we can see an example here where the clients provided some background about a launch that they intend to do, some campaign goals and objectives, target audience, key information about their unique selling proposition, etc. Your job as an account manager is to break this down and, of course, bring it into a core process. And rather than creating an AI agent that certainly responds to certain tasks over Slack or other kind of interfaces, we want to really kick off this process when myself as an account manager, when I'm not working. If it's 8 o'clock at night and my client submits this creative brief, I want work to go ahead and initiate. So to go ahead and think about creatively how we think about delivering on the promise of agentic and AI-based automation, we can see this example of a make scenario that incorporates many of the topics that we've talked about so far. First, it initiates based upon some event happening in the real world. In this example, we can see that this scenario is kicked off based upon when a document is in the ready for planning folder. Essentially, my clients are able to add a Google Doc at any point in time and put them in the right folder, and that's the indication that we're ready to kick this work off. We can also see key concepts that we talked about as well as basically as automators, we're able to identify when to use deterministic automation and when to use AI within a workflow and when to use agentic processes as well. So we can see here examples of deterministic workflow automation, where we're able to always search for documents that are in the planning stage. We're able to consistently get those document details, and based upon that, we're going to take a couple different actions. Here we can see an example of an evaluation to say if my campaign brief includes a particular word, in this case campaign, within the particular the file's title, then I'm going to go ahead and go down a defined process for managing those campaign briefs. You'll notice that I also have a concept of ad hoc briefs that would have different treatment. And again, these are examples of workflow automation that's highly deterministic and very straightforward. But of course, we're also incorporating the power of AI. We recognize that we're dealing with intensely qualitative information, that Google Doc. As you can imagine, people write all sorts of things in that Google document. So I've here leveraged a built-in make AI capabilities, and of course, this could work with any other AI provider as well, but highly simplified capabilities to enable me to analyze some text content and extract some information that is really important to my workflow and process, such as the campaign name, the client, or even the total campaign budget. You'll notice that this is the type of thing that generative AI is incredibly good at doing, pulling out key information from a set of qualitative information, much like we saw within this document, where anybody could write any number of different types of currencies, and of course, number formats that commonly trip up traditional automation. Here you'll notice I've also kind of divided and conquered. Rather than assuming that a single agent's going to be able to manage everything effectively, I've gone ahead and used ChatGPT, or more specifically OpenAI and their API, to go ahead and analyze that text and go ahead and create the set of tasks that are important for me as an account manager within that New York City advertising firm. And my last step, of course, is to recognize that now that I've got a set of tasks and I have a lot of things that need to happen and potentially a lot of different edge cases, I'm going to go ahead and hand off all this key information to my marketing campaign manager agent. Again, directly within Make, I have the ability to kick off this particular process and provide a set of context like the client name, the campaign name, and of course, the set of tasks that I've already determined from the previous task as well. Of course, as an AI agent, it's not just going to respond to that information, but AI agents, most importantly, have agency. It has the ability to use reasoning to determine what steps are necessary in order to go ahead and fulfill its role as a fantastic marketing campaign manager. You'll see that I've enabled this particular agent with the ability to send messages to the account team for confirmation, to go ahead and create new folder structures within our design tool like Canva. You'll note that it doesn't just have carte blanche access to Canva, but instead a very specific scenario that defines how to create scenario folders within my Canva structure in exactly the way that we work on a regular basis. And we've even included additional tools in our project management tool like Linear to be able to get work done. And so here we see an example of how we, as automators, we understand the variety of deterministic, AI-powered, and AI agents all working together for a single process. Each one of them is doing what it's best at, and I'm able to monitor and observe everything that's happening in a holistic sort of way instead of a black box for my organization. So increasingly, this is the skill set that will be mastered in 2026 in order to achieve real ROI on agentic projects. That brings us to our next kind of key theme emerging within 2026. And if you can't tell already, for many years in my career, I've actually worked in marketing and worked with some of the world's largest brands. And the phrase that always stuck with me, and when those brands think about how to come to market with unique content is king. Or of course, if you prefer, content is queen, is another way of saying it. And increasingly, content is no longer king. Content is increasingly easy to generate for small brands and big brands alike. But instead, context becomes king or most important to the world of AI. In some ways, if we really think about it, every single company in the world now has access to some of the most ridiculously transformative technology in a generation. So how do you actually differentiate what one company looks like and operates differently from another company that might be competing with that same company? And the answer is context. That context comes from you. It comes from internal within your systems, your processes, and even, yes, a non-sexy word like documentation. If you're like me, you've sometimes encountered and interacted with generative AI and you thought to yourself, and generative AI is actually kind of dumb. Like, why doesn't it know this thing? Why doesn't it answer in the particular way? And the truth is, LLMs actually don't fail because they're not smart enough. They often fail because they lack the appropriate context. And what we see coming into 2026 is this intense focus on the right processes and the right abilities to always have the right context and feed that context into AI in order to be effective. Now, context is one of these things that I'm sure there's many people on the call that could go really deep on it, but we'll kind of illustrate what this looks like through a demonstration of leveraging context in order to drive a business process forward effectively, and how important that particular context is. Just like before, we're all going to practice our creative abilities and our imaginative abilities this morning, and we're going to set the stage and imagine that you're an online shoe retailer. Of course, your business is thriving, it's growing like crazy. That's all fantastic news. But naturally, as your business grows, so do the complexity of dealing with so many one-off requests, and specifically dealing with refund requests becomes a nightmare. You know AI can help, and you want to make sure that you keep fantastic experiences that at the same time don't break the bank. So let's take a look at what that looks like inside of the world of make and automation. But before we look at it from the make perspective, we're actually going to zoom out a little bit and maybe like a good baking show, show you what the end result looks like. And what I'm about to show you is not necessarily in make, but this would be the front end. This is the imaginary front end of your e-commerce website. This is a simple vibe-coded tool that helps us illustrate this concept of what your customers might experience in an ideal customer experience, and how the subtlety of what make delivers underneath is brought to life. Here you'll note that as a fictional customer of this online shoe retailer, I can see a history of my past orders. I can see every one of them has been delivered, and I have the ability to, of course, come here and identify more details about that order. And in some cases, I want to request a refund. I can identify what reasons, what items I want to get a refund. I can provide additional details, and of course, submit my refund request. Now, what's happening actually behind the scenes here in this beautiful and very simple end user experience is that actually we're using the power of agentic capabilities to analyze information about this customer, about their order, and to be able to determine basically one of three outcomes without any involvement from my team whatsoever. It might be that the request needs additional review. It might be that the refund is automatically granted, or it might be that the refund is rejected for whatever reason right off the bat. So here we can see different experiences that in the old world of early 2020s, this would have been difficult to kind of think through all of the edge cases necessary and go ahead and code that into your application. But instead, what we can see here is the power of agents, as well as the incredible power of context and how important that context is. Here we can see in this instance, the request cannot be filled. So this is the result of fantastic agentic automation. Let's take just a little bit of a look at what it looks like inside of Make to create an agent that has the ability to do those two types of things. Of course, this agent's actually triggered based upon somebody hitting that submit button, but this agent's goal in life is to be a refund processor. You can see a little bit of the directive that I've given this agent to identify what's its role. But most importantly, I want to highlight both specifically the context that I've provided to this AI agent, as well as some of the tools that are necessary for it to be very intelligent in its decision-making. In the world of online e-commerce, the rules and the definitions around exactly when and why you might actually process a refund are actually quite detailed. And in fact, they might change on a regular basis. If we were to take a quick look at what these types of rules look like, it might look something like this, where we have a set of policies internally to determine our automatic refund criteria, as well as automatic rejection criteria. And in many ways, these are the types of qualitative types of information that many businesses depend upon and rely upon. And our goal here is to make sure that our AI agents deeply understand this context in order to make decisions effectively. So in this particular case, I've actually set up both key processes of automating the process of approving this policy and procedure, making sure that I only take approved policies and procedures and make those available to my agent as context. And then I have confidence that it's always working with the most recent policies and procedures about refunds in my company. And most importantly, while we extend the concept of context here, is to recognize that context also includes key information that exists inside your business. If you have a messy data landscape and no way of pulling data from one system to another, you're unlikely to be able to deploy an effective AI agent strategy. Here you'll see that I have several tools that are accessible to my AI agent that enable it to make decisions effectively. Examples like getting additional details about my order information, or of course the refund history, where I might have policies and procedures that determine whether an automatic refund can be processed based upon this customer's history of refunds. So it's incredibly important for organizations to be able to think deeply about some of the less sexy parts of their business. Those things like having very clear documented policies and procedures, and very clear understanding of how they can ensure that they're consistently able to pull the right data into an agent to give it the right context to ensure it can make the right decision. Well, that brings us to one last emerging theme as we look into 2026 this year. And we really think about MCP as one of these new and emerging exciting technologies. And it's very important that we begin to think about this technology and how we leverage it as a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. Of course, on the call today, I suspect we have a whole range of people with skills and experience with technologies like MCP. So briefly, let's get an understanding of what MCP is. And of course, we'll get a chance to reinforce this concept through a demo. So ultimately, MCP is a protocol that helps AI clients, we'll say, talk to other tools, and of course, be able to accomplish tasks or pull in additional information. This happens in the old way. When we were looking at AI agents a couple of years ago, you would have had to do things like custom functions and get really fancy in how you think about making sure that has the ability. But in other words, this is a standard format that enables an AI client to be able to interact with a whole set of other tools. Those tools are most likely software applications that exist throughout your entire business. And of course, Make at its core exists to be able to connect the technology stack. In reality, Make actually serves lots of value propositions associated with MCP, both acting as an MCP client or enabling AI agents to be able to do that. But today we'll look at an example where Make operates as an MCP server. In other words, serving up the exact tools that I need in order to accomplish my work effectively. We'll use an MCP client. In just a few moments, we'll use Anthropic Claude as a chat interface that you might be interacting with in order to trigger processes inside of Make. And of course, we'll see how Make operates and the key value proposition of Make. Now, one of the things that you might be thinking is virtually every software in the world has introduced an MCP server. I'd refer to that as the standard MCP. And we'll see an example in a little bit where we might think of working with my CRM. You can certainly imagine that your CRM, whether it's HubSpot or Salesforce, might also have an MCP server. And what we're going to illustrate today through that demo is what's the real difference between having my AI interact directly with HubSpot versus interact with my CRMs with Make MCP, essentially as an orchestration layer to enable more precise control, that scalpel approach rather than a sledgehammer. What's important to recognize about MCP and how agents interact with tools is that agents essentially look at a server. They say, give me a list of tools that I have access to. For each one of those tools, that tool has inputs and it gets outputs. That's as simple as it gets. And the downside of that is if you have lots of tools and you have lots of inputs and lots of outputs, the more of those things you're likely to have, the less likely AI is going to be successful in applying exactly what you need in order to get work done. With Make MCP, you actually have the ability to have lots of control over your tools with well-defined inputs and outputs controlled based upon your own business rules, and predictable execution that can chain multiple systems together as opposed to just one system at a time. So much more detailed control over how you manage MCP deployment. And what that means is you visually understand what's happening. You have an understanding of applying business logic, also managing things like permissions and governance, and reliable execution of core business processes over time. Now, we're going to go ahead and jump into the demo once again, and we'll see an example of how this might work within Claude. I suspect many of you are familiar with these types of interfaces. This might be everything from Gemini to Claude to, of course, ChatGPT. But ultimately, despite what I said at the beginning, there are still absolutely valid reasons that you might want to kick off work or enhance your work by chatting with an interface. That's going to happen on a regular basis. So I've hooked up my Claude to my Make MCP server, which means it has a set of tools that are available to it. And I can say something like, tell me about my customer. And we're going to pretend I have a very big customer, AT&T. So at this particular instance, we're going to see if the demo gods are going to play well today. And we're going to go ahead and ask ChatGPT Claude to behave. I'm a pretty adventurous person, which means I like to do live demos all the time. So let's give this one more chance and we'll see how things are going. Maybe he doesn't like AT&T. Tell me about my customer. We're going to say Starbucks instead. That sounds delightful. All right. We seem to be off a little bit better than we were before. Fantastic. So you'll note that the AI has identified that I want information about my customer Starbucks. Of course, that information doesn't exist in the broader world. So it's actually identified that it has a make tool, or essentially a scenario that it can access this information. I should be clear that this is all entirely demo information. I don't actually have a customer that's an active customer that has a $5.5 million ARR, but you can get a sense of the incredible power that by hooking up this Make MCP server with key information about my customer, I can simply chat with Anthropic in order to pull that information in. Now, you might be saying to yourself, you could simply have done that by hooking up Salesforce or HubSpot. But what's key here is I can actually return more information that includes things like recent support tickets that might come from multiple systems, and ultimately provide my AI with just the right context. We're going to look at one more example to really illustrate this point and bring it all the way home. Add a new customer to my CRM, which is, and in this case, you can see that I'm feeling like I'm ready to have some coffee. So we're going to say Beans and Brews. And of course, in this instance, it's again smart enough to identify what tools do I have access to, and of course, determine which one's right. And I want you to take special notice in this particular instance where not only is it saying I'm going to add this to my CRM for here, but in this particular instance, it's asking for the website of Beans and Brews. And I want you to remember that, and you'll see why in just a second. So once I provided it with that key detail that's important for it to be able to process, you'll notice that it'll go ahead and continue to process. And again, this is a way I can supercharge some of my work. I can see now that I'm creating the new company in the CRM. So it's successfully added it to my CRM, in this case, HubSpot. I can, of course, click on that and go out to my HubSpot environment. I want to help you understand what this looks like behind the scenes, and it's actually incredibly simple. So here we're looking at an example of a make scenario that's actually the scenario that's used to run that exact process that we saw just previously. And I, again, want to illustrate the differences between having a standard MCP connection with HubSpot versus using Make as the orchestration layer to be able to connect just the right details. And the fundamental pieces of what makes this all work is really a recognition that I have a scenario that operates as a tool. And that scenario has a set of inputs, in other words, something that the AI can provide, and it has a set of outputs. And in this case, you'll notice that the output for what I wanted to provide is the HubSpot URL. And the inputs that I've asked that this scenario can use is, of course, the business name, the name of the business, and in this case, the business domain. And in fact, I've described to the AI essentially to be able to say, this is the web address of the business, always confirmed by the user. In other words, don't make this up. This is the type of context that the AI is able to use effectively in order to drive the right decision. And here I've actually identified it as required. So this is a brief glimpse into how you can enforce business rules to make sure that you're not just putting garbage into your CRM and always getting the right details. You'll also notice that I limited it to literally just the company name and the domain, and none of these other fields are necessarily getting filled out. I certainly have the option to fill those out as other details, but I might also identify that I don't want to overwhelm AI. The more options you give AI, the less likely it is to be successful. If it was to try out to fill out every one of these pieces, it's actually likely to fail on a regular basis. I can also define and set the lead origin in a certain way on a regular basis as well, and have much more control. And of course, in this instance, I'm returning back to AI a very friendly link to be able to go and directly access it. So what you're noticing is that a deeper amount of control and ability to have precision over the actions that I make available to other AI agents, whether they are AI agents themselves or clients like Anthropic. All right, with all of that context and those demos in place, we want to do a brief review of those key trends that are shaping AI and automation in 2026. I'm positive that there will be more trends among this, but these are the things that we see among some of the most successful customers that are becoming experts in how to achieve that value gap. They're thinking about AI in a comprehensive way at the core of their business, not just deploying Slack bots or Microsoft Teams bots, but instead thinking about the set of workflow where work can be triggered, and of course, work can be delivered and connected with humans only when necessary. Of course, In 2026, the people that understand when to use deterministic versus non-deterministic versus AI-driven workflows, those are the people that are going to be successful in deploying and getting this value. We recognize the absolutely critical importance of being able to do simple things like really strong documentation as you think about agents potentially doing some of the tasks that you used to be able to do or have to do. And so context is, of course, king in 2026. And we learned a little bit of how we can rein in MCP and, of course, use a scalpel rather than a sledgehammer. Hopefully those are useful as we think about it. I'm going to give it a chance to turn it back over to Michael, and he'll talk a little bit more about how you may take some of these topics and take the next step on your automation and AI journey.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Darren. I don't know about you, but from all of the promises I was given this year, the start of the year until now, this has been incredibly grounding, and it's useful to see how practical it is today. This isn't a future-looking idea. These aren't future-looking systems and processes. These are things you can do and make today. And yeah, thank you for your time and insight, Darren. So what does this mean for you today? What does this mean in what you can actually do? So there are a few practical guidelines that you can start thinking about today, start considering in your processes. First point, automate core workflows first. For the predictable majority of your problems that you'll face, deterministic automation is perfectly suited to solve those with the required level of control for your business context. For the specific problems where there is fuzziness or complexity, AI and agents can be incredibly valuable. And a simple rule of thumb that we try to keep in mind is, if it needs thinking or reasoning, use an agent. If it just needs doing, use automation. And that rule of thumb has been useful for myself and a few of our colleagues and customers as well. Provide structured context. So roles, rules, and data matter a lot. So in a future where context is king or queen, please make sure to give your AI the best chance by providing documented policies and procedures to make your solutions as efficient as possible. Govern your AI actions via tools. So with MCP, you don't have to rely on just prompts. You can use Make's MCP server to ensure AI executes governed, reliable, and controllable actions. Crucially, controllable being the operative word there, turning your AI into a precision instrument rather than spraying blindly. And finally, measure outcomes, not prompts. So value will always be novelty. And as we focus to shifting to agents detecting work, initiating and completing end-to-end workflows autonomously, we move beyond simple prompting. So this ties back to what we found and what OpenAI's findings were as well, that the best architecture for success is a combination of agentic and deterministic automation to get the most effective outcomes. If you are very early in your journey or wondering where to start, we've packaged all of this into the Make AI playbook. The Make AI playbook was debuted at Waves. So if some of you were at Waves, you would have seen this. You would have got a sneak preview of this. But it is essentially includes a maturity assessment and also some practical frameworks, as well as a step-by-step guidance from experimentation to execution. So it's a summary, practical tool to help you encapsulate basically what we've discussed today, to help you put that into action today. It's free. It's built from what we've learned deploying AI automation at scale internally as well as with customers. And so if you want to move faster in 2026, this gives you a structured path towards that. So if you go to playbook.make.com, you should have access to that, and you can plot yourself along your journey and then, take immediate steps towards AI and automation perfection. So we'll open it up a little bit. We are up on time, but we've got a few more minutes for some questions. If you haven't already, please make sure to drop your questions into the Q&A panel, but I will start opening up and read some of the questions that we have. So let's start from the bottom. So Can AI agent initiate tasks by itself? And this is from Aaron.
Hi, Aaron. The short answer to your question is yes, absolutely. And the longer answer is a little bit goes to that concept of where we think about people commonly think of chatbots as the main way to initiate interaction with an AI agent. But instead, we see very often the other patterns that emerge is one of them is that an agent is able to do things on a recurring basis. I have an AI agent that's set up for me that every morning it actually wakes up, if you will, and it analyzes information about my calendar for the day. It looks at people that I'm about to meet with. It gathers information that I should know about them and sends that to me as a Slack message. So notice that I didn't have to tell it to do that. It simply knows to do that on a regular basis every morning. We also see a pattern, of course, where agents are triggered by some other process. Earlier on, we saw a demo where the agent wasn't doing anything until a refund request was submitted. And in Make terms, we refer to that as a webhook initiated scenario and an agent behind that. But ultimately, agents are triggered based upon some core work process happening or based upon some scheduled event or a regular recurrence of an event.
Excellent. And just to add to that as well, we've recently released a new feature, the Make AI web search feature, which features a lot of live web data into your scenarios. So you could ultimately create a scenario that is triggered by a live web event. So that's another exciting feature that you can try out today as well. Second question from Hernani. What innovations can we expect from Make in 2026? You may have missed our Waves keynote video on our YouTube channel. If you haven't seen that, please make sure to have a look at that. But I'll pass over to Darren, who can share some of the exciting highlights.
Yeah, our focus today wasn't necessarily on all the amazing new capabilities that are going to be shipped by Make in 2026, but I'm happy to talk through a few of those really exciting examples. And I'll start with the two that I'm most particularly excited about. Today, during our demonstrations, we saw lots of examples of leveraging Make AI agents, and of course, providing those agents with the right context and providing them with the right tools. And what I'm particularly excited about, and in fact, is a capability that is in closed beta as we speak, is the capability to bring a much richer, much deeper, more meaningful information about how the agent is designed and how it ultimately operates to the Make canvas that we all know and love to design and create automations. What that means is not only an easier ability for me to go ahead and create that agent, but deeper insights into exactly how it's operating, and most specifically, deeper insights into how it's reasoning. So AI agents ultimately perform reasoning steps. They think about what they should do and they move on to the next step. As you're creating a real-world production agent to use in your business, it's super important that you get an opportunity to understand how the AI is thinking about a particular problem. So having that level of visibility is going to be incredibly important for our customers. There's also some really excited pieces in there to think about how agents also work with what's referred to as multimodal. In other words, not just text, but other types of content as well that I'm particularly excited about. We also announced recently the availability coming in 2026 of something called Maya by Make. And Maya ultimately brings us that promise of AI as a key assistant in not only building, but also troubleshooting key workflows and scenarios directly inside of Make. Maya is unique in its ability to not just have like a one-shot, hey, here's your scenario based upon your description, but instead operates as a true partner in automation and be able to ask you clarifying details, help you set up connections, and walk you through what's necessary to be successful in setting up core automations for your business. There are many other things, including innovations for our core product, things that I know many Make customers are particularly excited about, like merging two paths together, but a whole list of those things, and definitely check out those recordings from our amazing customer conference that was in Munich in November, I think. Yes. Thanks for the question.
Excellent. I think it's a nice segue into our next question, which I think you might have already answered. But will your agents be exportable in the future?
Yes. And again, a simple answer is yes. And in fact, the way that we kind of reference that as we think about the future of AI agents within Make is to bring that agent concept directly into the canvas. That ultimately means for you very technical or experienced Make users, that means that the definition of the agent itself, the definition of its tools, the descriptions, everything else, they're ultimately a part of the scenario blueprint at that point in time. That becomes really critically important to us as we recognize one of the biggest barriers to people getting value from AI is simply understanding the art of the possible and getting a head start with what others have produced and be able to be successful with. So we're very excited both to provide pre-built agents by our Make team, as well as to enable you to leverage an incredible feature from Make recently, the scenario sharing, to be able to share those scenarios that include agents and the definitions and descriptions all within them to inspire others and help them along their automation journey.
Excellent. Thank you, Darren. Next question is around the difference between automations and agents. So we obviously discussed the spectrum, automation spectrum earlier, but maybe if you could give a quick 15 to 20 seconds explainer.
You got it. So without getting too academic, if you break it down and think about what an automation is some goal is achieved without me doing something. And we would suggest that there's a whole set of different ways that you might achieve that goal. Sometimes you're designing a workflow that does steps A, B, C, and then always looks at G and determines what next steps to do. That would be a traditional workflow automation. And an agent, you're giving it more autonomy, essentially, if you will. So the word agent means agencia. It's a Latin word for the ability to be able to make my own decisions. So an agent's another form of automation, is how I would describe it. And whether an agent is the right decision for you, I think is something to actually spend some time with. There's so many people that have been incredibly inspired by the power of agents, and rightfully so. But thinking about whether an agent makes sense in the particular scenario is an important consideration to make. And hopefully the playbook and many other resources we're providing, an incredible partner network, can help you think through those different evaluations.
We are running up on time, so I will give the very last question to one of our future-looking, exciting developments. And this is a question about MCP, which I know is your favorite topic at the moment, Darren.
Yes. So this is, again, on the screen, what makes the Make MCP different or better than normal MCP. And what I would identify most specifically is enhanced precision and control. And again, what we're all going through is a little bit of a learning curve on how AI best operates. And what's interesting is when you give AI, literally, if I give AI hundreds of tools and each tool has hundreds of fields and each tool has hundreds of outputs, my results actually get worse over time. So what Make MCP allows you to do is have flexibility over control of exactly what tools are exposed to a particular AI client, as well as how those tools are configured. And it allows me to go back to that other concept of mixing some of this determinism with non-determinism as well. So for example, I can create a single tool that creates a customer in my HubSpot and my Freshdesk. And of course, that is something I would have to rely upon AI knowing to do every single time. But here I know it's my standard customer onboarding process. So I created it as a standard process. I know it's executed the same exact way every single time. But of course, AI can determine what are the right inputs to provide to that process. So ultimately, this is about more precision, more control, which means more reliability in a production environment. There are other benefits as well, things like being able to audit exactly what happened and visually understand what occurs as well. That's certainly going to be things that are appealable to our IT friends and other people as well. Great question.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian, for that question. Yeah, and I think I set you up a little bit there, Darren, just to finish on a bang. And so I think we are up on time just now. So I will finish off with just a massive thank you very much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure having this many people engaged and willing to discuss and converse and learn more and share more about what we do here at Make. It's been a hell of a year. We've internally learned a lot, and we're going to continue to grow and improve. And it's only possible because you are all part of it and helping us get to the finish line together. So thank you very much. This session has been recorded. You'll get a copy, the on-demand version, tomorrow in an email, as well as a few thank yous for joining. There are a few links in there that I think would be very interesting based on some of the questions we got today. But just to say a massive, massive thank you on behalf of everyone here at Make. Happy holidays, and we look forward to helping you turn your AI ambition into real business value in 2026. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, everyone. Cheers.